Welcome to the Hugs Not Drugs podcast. I'm John Barleycorn, and I'm here with Dr. Uggs. Say something, Dr. Uggs. Something. You got a good show today. I know that. This guy's terrific. And yeah, thank you. And Hugs Not Drugs, say something. You know I have the same voice as you, John Barleycorn. One day people are going to get that joke. All right, so why don't you say the commercial? We should have just thanked the music before this was Harry and he and his band, and the name of the music was Sketchbook. And I thank you, Harry. You always kill it. So I appreciate you. Now, go ahead, Dr. Uggs, and do a commercial. All right, this is brought to you, this podcast, this incredible podcast, I might say, is in a lot of ways, not the way I'm thinking, but sometimes, this incredible podcast is brought to you by John Forlenza-Bailey's 2 books that he wrote. John Forlenza-Bailey's a prince, by the way. He wrote 2 books. The first one was the Road to Wellness Workbook, and that workbook is designed to provide education, emotional support, and inspiration to persons suffering from addiction. It offers step-by-step lessons to people striving to turn their lives around regarding abstinence, relapse prevention, family dynamics, and self-assessment to continue to discover self day by day. Recovery's up to you. Mental's help. Journals help. But you must exchange and surrender destructive behaviors for constructive ways of handling day-to-day stressors or triggers of life. No one deserves to continue to suffer from active addiction. Get better, do the work. And the second book is I'm the star of this book, and it's all about me, and I want everybody to know that. And John Barleycorn here jumping in. It's not about you. It's called The Transformation of Dr. Uggs. Go for it. Yeah, The Transformation of Dr. Uggs is an original fairy tale that explains the progression of the disease of chemical dependency. It's not intended to be a story about blaming others for the acquisition of an illness. This fairy tale is intended to explain, not to blame. It is a story of discovery, insight, acceptance, and finally the right choices to live drug-free if one is chemically dependent. So that's it. Back to you, Barleycorn. Go for it. Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to thank John G. Is it okay if I call you John G? I'll just, okay. Because it's, I don't want to ruin anonymity and stuff. And if you wanted to give yourself another name besides John G, that would be okay.
John G will work just fine.
All right. Thank you. All right. I've known John for quite a few years. John is intelligent. I don't know why he's on this show, but he's intelligent, he's wise, and he has helped, I don't know how many. God knows how many people he's helped with the beginnings of their recovery, and continues to do that. And I met him a long time ago, and I appreciate him so much. So thank you for doing this. Appreciate you. So, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you for the compliment. And, I was once told that if I'm the most intelligent person in the room, I'm probably in the wrong room. I'd like to say that that's not the case today. So
we know that you're in the wrong room if you're with us. Just shut up, okay? Let this man talk. So is this your first podcast?
Yes, it is, as a matter of fact, yes.
Well, guess what? It probably won't be your last. Okay. So, because if you enjoy this, I want you to come back as much as you want. Anytime you want to do this, you let me know, and the floor is yours. Because I'm trying to give a voice to people that I admire so much, and I thank you for doing this again. So, do you have anything specifically you want to talk about today?
Not in particular, other than I think the purpose of me being here today is to share experience, strength, and hope. And I know that I could relate to my own hopelessness when I originally came into recovery, and how I was fearful that life would not change in ways that I thought it possibly could when I came into recovery. So today I just look back and I could look at the big picture and remember what it was like the day before I made the decision to come into recovery. And even if I have a difficult day today, I could look at that big picture and say, how has my life changed, since I originally came in? And it's really been a marvelous journey.
I'm gonna interrupt from time to time. That is not how we do it in recovery. I wanted to have a conversation with you about this, but exactly, I think that's what this podcast is about, to offer education, information, and inspiration to uh, our viewers, or our, not well, our listeners. And so, can you tell us where you grew up, and what your childhood was like, and your first use?
Yes. Um, my first use was probably in utero because my mom was 16 when I was born, and mom and dad used to like to drink beer. And the story of the family is my father's father had died of spinal cancer when he was 45 years old, but ultimately the cause was, as my dad says, he drank himself to death.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was 11. He had two older brothers and a younger sister. And actually, all of them had developed alcoholism. Uh, and it turned out my dad was the last person to actually come into recovery. My sober date is December 9th, 1988, and my dad's is March 1st, 1992.
So do you really believe that this is an illness?
Yeah, not only yes, I believe it's an illness, and there's some discussion about whether or not it's an illness or a disease, but I look at those terms being rather interchangeable.
Yeah, me too. I also think that you got this, you inherited this, and you got it environmentally too.
Yeah, a definition of alcoholism that I like to use, and it's a variation of one I heard many years ago, kind of goes like this. Alcoholism is a primary chronic disease with genetic, environmental, and psychosocial factors influencing the development and manifestations. The disease is often progressive and sometimes fatal. It is characterized by a continuous or periodic loss of control over drinking, continued drinking despite adverse consequences, and distortions in thinking, most notably denial.
I told you he was intelligent. I don't know why he's on this show. Okay, go for it.
So, as far as the last part of that definition, the denial thing, and I like to use an acronym for that, which many of you may have already heard: DENIAL. Don't even notice I am lying, or don't even know I am lying. Um, and if we look at that definition, and one of the things that gave me some clarity in terms of my own understanding of alcoholism was the explanation of that definition. And if we look at the very beginning of it, it says alcoholism is a primary chronic disease. And if you say primary and chronic, well, I think chronic most people can relate to and say, well, chronic like COPD or heart disease or something of an incurable nature that could be possibly arrested. But the idea of a primary disease is something that our denial will allow us to deny the fact that it is a primary disease. And what do we mean by a primary disease? Well, the doctors would use a word like, well, primary means that the disease is of its own etiology or its own origin. And that being the case, this is a disease. The denial tells us we have a disease that doesn't, we have a disease that tells us we don't have a disease.
Yeah.
And we blame people, places, and things outside of ourselves and all these other conditions. Now, my particular case, I was diagnosed early on when I first came into Detox, and even before that, I was untreated bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, um, and some of these other things. And there are people that I know that I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I was a fireman. I was trapped 4 different times. I got hit by cars twice, and I was abused. So if we look at that trauma, the PTSD, so some of us will look at the conditions surrounding our life and say this is the reason that we drink alcoholically. And the way I learned to come to know that this is a primary disease is that, there are millions of other people that are out there that suffer from bipolar, major depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, paranoid schizophrenic, low resale value on their Ford Pinto, whatever the case is. And we will continue to use these excuses and think if we could take care of these other issues, that somehow we could take care of our drinking. But the fact of the matter is, all of those millions of other people that suffer from those problems, they don't drink the way alcoholics do. We drink alcoholically because that is our primary disease. We are alcoholics.
Yeah. Can I interrupt Barleycorn here? I just want to reiterate what you just said. It's so important. It doesn't matter if you have lots and lots of primary illnesses that are trying to kill you. If you don't use the first illness, take away the alcohol, the drugs, the addictive substances, so you can deal with the other issues that you have. But if you don't do this first, you're not going to get well from the other things.
And that was exactly right. And then, I actually did an internship at a hospital for a year, and I would be taking notes and say, well, this person is exhibiting depression and anxiety, and then and then one of the other counselors would say to me, well, John, they're in detox. Of course, they're going to experience these things. And so what I found out was that by treating my alcoholism and getting in the 12-step program for recovery, whether it be AA, NA, CA, or anything related to substance with 12 steps in it, that by treating and with the guidance of other recovery people, attending meetings and having that personal connection and having a sponsor, what I found was that by treating my alcoholism, most of these other conditions that I was suffering from ameliorated or just lessened during time to the point that they've disappeared. And what was interesting was in my first year of recovery, I was diagnosed with dysthymia, which is a basic low-grade depression, which I was told would continue forever because I was also, I am primarily an alcoholic, but I'm also a cocaine addict. And I was told that pretty much I burnt out the pleasure centers of my brain in such a way that I would never really be able to experience true happiness in my life, let alone joy. But I found out that through treatment of my alcoholism and addiction, that was not the case at all. And I experienced a happiness and a joy that I would never have believed possible.
And what's the cure for alcoholism?
Well, we read it at meetings.
It's a trick question, isn't it?
Yes, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. The best kept secret in AA, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that fellow named Who Knew, when he said, "Who knew?"
Yes, I don't know.
That's the other fella.
That's right.
Uh-oh, I'm getting off track here. Sorry about that.
And the two things that I could not say when I first came in, and it was, I don't know, and please help me. Those were the two hardest phrases for me to say as an alcoholic. And I found that to be pretty universal for most folks that are coming in.
Yeah, I see you. I came into the meeting today at 6:30. We go to a very early meeting. You have to be awful self-actualized to realize that this is a good thing to do. So, and I saw you smiling and just in love with life, and that perks me up when I see you smiling. I see everybody else having a good time and getting ready for the meeting. It's just a wonderful thing to do. So go on.
Well, yeah.
Because how long did you use and when did you come to these insights? What happened?
Well, and just a quick overview of the history. I mean, my first experience of doing something to change the way I felt, I remember, well, I remember when I was probably as young as 5 years old, and my father and his two brothers would be watching ball games, and they'd be leaving half-empty cans and bottles of beer around,
Mm.
and I got a taste of that when I was about 5.
Mm-hmm.
My great grandmother was from Italy, and she would take me to the park, and of course, I was getting whiskey on my gums for teething. And my Italian grandmother, great grandmother from Naples, Italy, in her infinite wisdom, she would put a little Chianti wine in the grape juice when I was at Prospect Park in the stroller.
Now we're
So now it's
talking.
now it's time to take a nap, Johnny. And I remember that just being so pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
Having that bottle with a little Chianti in it and just fading off, watching the leaves on the elm trees. It was, and I was 3 years old, and I can remember that like it was yesterday.
Wow. Wow. So,
And then after that, I remember I was about 7, and I was in a hallway on Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn, and some kid said, if you breathe really deeply and fast a few times, and then I'll come around and I'll grab you from behind. And I didn't realize what they were setting me up for, and I had hyperventilated, and then they would cut off my oxygen, and I had this unbelievable feeling of euphoria, and then I just passed out. But that feeling I chased for the next 22 years after that. And I remember when I was 9, I went to see the Yellow Submarine animated movie, the Beatles movie. And my friend Joe from around the corner, he had some handkerchiefs with, I believe it was either testers or Wellwood glue, and we were huffing glue. And I remember hallucinating while watching this animated Beatles cartoon. So that was my first introduction to psychedelia, which really manifested when I was about 13 or 14 with the introduction of LSD to the neighborhood and mescaline.
yeah, now you're traumatizing even me because I remember one of my friends uh, when I was in high school, and I was 13, so I wasn't in high school. All his classmates came to his funeral because of his huffing glue, and it didn't fare well. And that that didn't stop me either. But I'll tell you, dangerous stuff, and we didn't know.
Yes, and then I remember I was playing baseball at the park one day, and a friend of mine, Jimmy, said, well, let's go over to my house. So I went over. Jimmy was about a year or two older than me, and we go in there and we raided his dad's liquor cabinet and pulled out a quart of Imperial whiskey.
Good for you.
And boy, we knocked that thing down like there was no tomorrow. And I don't remember exactly how I walked home. I don't remember the route, but I remember I was laying on the front lawn, and I went in the house and threw up all over my bed. And then I went downstairs with the sheets, and I was making an attempt to hide this from my mom. And so I had thrown, instead of cleaning the sheets off, I just threw the vomit-filled sheets right in the washing machine downstairs,
Not a good
and
look.
it was not a good look at all.
Oh my God.
And then it became drinking beer in the schoolyard, which was the basic pastime. Growing up, good Catholic school boys, 8th, 9th grade, we're drinking in the schoolyard and smoking pot.
I always thought that was a paradox. Good Catholic boys.
Yes, it's a bit of an oxymoron, kind of like jumbo shrimp or military intelligence. No, not to knock out service people, though. I love service people and respect what they do. But yes, it is a bit of an oxymoron. Um, Fighting was a part of our culture, and and we were taught to have a certain kind of rugged individualism. And it was a matter of, when you were old enough to go to the bar, you drank heavily, and if you felt like you were passing out, you always kept one eye open somehow, one hand on your wallet and one eye open. You know.
I know you're a firefighter. When did you get you do that? I mean, that's a lot of training and that's a lot of discovery.
Well, I think what happened was, and getting back to, let's talk about shame for a minute. As
Okay.
as Carl Jung had defined shame as he's credited with defining it as a chronic underlying sense of unworthiness. And I found out when I was a kid that I was only as good, or my perception of being good was only as good as, the Catholic nuns, the priests, the kids that I was growing up with, my parents, people in the neighborhood. I was only as good as the opinion of other people were about me. And I didn't really have any kind of a sense of self. So this inner voice, this inner critic was talking to myself, and I had this immense sense of shame, that I just wasn't good enough. And that started probably when I was in about the fourth grade or third grade. I tried to make the swim team at the little Catholic school I was going to, and the coach actually lived in my building, and he told me not to come back, because I just wasn't good enough to make the team. And of course, my shame led me to being a human doing. And I said, you know what, I'll show them. And, I ended up making the team the next year. And by the time I was in the eighth grade, I was the freestyle champ of half of Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
And,
Oh, wow.
and then in my freshman year, I was the only kid to win two individual gold medals in the freshman Catholic school meet in Brooklyn and Queens.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And so that went on, but I kind of peaked at that point because at that age, that was when I was having this inner battle between wanting to train to be an elite swimmer, yet wanted to hang out with the guys and learning. I learned how to play electric guitar, so now I'm hanging out with these, kids that were just wanting to, make noise music and smoke pot and take, psychedelics and drink. So I was leading this kind of, dual, almost chameleon kind of life.
That happens a lot, doesn't it? A double life.
Yes, yes, and it was the shame, and I was ashamed and felt guilty about my behavior, and so that continued on and on and on, and that continued on throughout high school, and I was going to the school that I had to take two trains and buses to go to, and I had to be leave the house at 5 in the morning to go to swim practice before school, and then I had to take two trains and two buses back into Brooklyn to go to the YMCA and swim there. And it was sometimes up to sometimes 3-4 hours a day of just traveling, and it made me a little bit weary, of that, and then wanting to go out on weekends, and then so it started interfering with my training. But I maintained that well enough that I started working as a lifeguard at a place called Brighton Beach Baths, which is no longer in existence. And then when I was 15 years old, I went out to the beach and I was working on Brighton Beach as an ocean lifeguard.
Holy smokes! You talk about uh, accelerating, and that's an awful lot of responsibility for a young man. Where were you in the in your brothers and sisters, and what line? It sounds like you were the
Yes,
firstborn.
I was, and I had a younger sister who was just shy of 4 years younger than me. And when I learned to swim, she had learned also. And she ended up becoming a New York State swimming champion and a Big East
Mm-hmm.
collegiate champion,
Mm-hmm.
and swam in, her relay was ranked like fourth in the country in women's open swimming. So I had this younger sister because, of course, my mom was taking her with me to the Y, and she probably had a little bit more natural talent than I did. And so it was this kind of, somewhat of a rivalry, I kind of led the path for her to get into this, but she had became went to the next level in terms of competition.
So yeah.
And
So
so that was difficult to deal with.
so it that making it was easier to make a decision to hang out than to work this hard if my sister is going to outshine me anyway.
Yes, so there was this, which kind of relates back to the shame, because if I'm a human doing, I can never do enough to compensate for that shamed self because of the inner critic.
Yeah, and you don't know this at the time. When did you get this kind of insight about yourself
Well,
in history?
Well, that wasn't until I actually came into recovery. I came into AA and started to, I was in search of the truth. But I had been working as a fireman in Midtown Manhattan. Of course, that's a whole nother story. I was 21 years old, and here I am, not only a firefighter, but the fire inspector for Times Square. So, we're inspecting places and, hanging out with showgirls and strippers and, and all of the nightlife of the Midtown district was just certainly accelerated things. And just to give an example, there were 25 men in my company, and within less than 5 years, two of them had died of AIDS, and another one just died of an outright overdose.
You were fortunate, with all that temptation and all those accolades. You're very fortunate to be alive right now.
Well, the analogy that I like to use is that I've used up more lives than a litter of kittens.
Mother of pearl. I can't get that visual out of my head. I hope I get that visual out of my head before I go to sleep
That's right.
tonight.
A cat's got 9 lives, but I've used more than a litter of kittens.
Mother of pearl. Okay. All right. So now you're basically a pretty well-known person by this time, and respected. And so, how did you? Where was the fall? What happened?
Well, I think around the time I was on the fire department, I was drinking out of control, and of course, I had a wife. I had met a woman on the beach. We had gotten married, and and I had gotten her pregnant, and we have a daughter together now that's 40. She'll be 46 years old soon, and she's an internationally known therapist and author in her own right, which is interesting. But yeah, so we had got married, and then we ended up, as a result of my alcoholism, we ended up getting divorced when I guess I was 20, 23. So we got married when we were 20, and before my 23rd birthday, we had gotten divorced.
What was the problem?
The problem was I wasn't showing up emotionally, spiritually for her, and I had gotten to the point where my desire to drink had led to me acting abusively towards her. There was an episode one time we had a bunch of people over the house, and she was just telling me that I had to stop, and I poured a quart of beer over her head, and that was really I tried to humiliate her, and that was really a terrible thing to do, which I've been able to make amends as a result of that, but the damage was long lasting, and probably to this day even still dealing with some of the aftermath of that behavior all those years ago.
Was this your only marriage?
No, I got married again, and after that initial period, I had gotten to the point where after the divorce, my alcoholism and addiction had taken off to the point that I ended up homeless. Lost everything. Ended up actually living under the boardwalk in Coney Island for a short period of time.
How is this why the Drifters? This is a terrible joke. Is this why the Drifters wrote that song?
Yes, yes.
Under the boardwalk.
Under the boardwalk. Yes, down by the sea. Yes.
How old were you when you were down by the sea?
This is, I would say, and now I could feel the sand fleas biting. It wasn't as romantic as the Drifters song. I could feel the sand fleas biting and the red marks all over my body when I would get up, and just the smell of urine from the other bums that were living under there with me, and it was pretty horrific. So I was about 24, maybe 23, 24. I was still working in Midtown, and that was the irony of it. Here I am working in Midtown Manhattan as a firefighter, a fire inspector for Times Square, and yet I'm, homeless at that point. And there was a short period of time where when it started to get cold, I was living in hallways. I would generally find a 6-story building and go up to the bulkhead right behind the roof, and I would use my jacket as a pillow and just kind of, sleep on the stairs, on the upper landing of the stairs, and try to stay out of sight. And then did some couch surfing, had some friends, but that got old, and had actually gone back to my mom and dad's house for a short stint. But my dad used to leave for work at about 1 in the morning. He worked two jobs. And the idea of me coming home all lit up just did not sit well with him. He says, "You just can't do this, and you can't stay here." So after I was with them for a short time, I was back out to being homeless. But eventually I got enough money together that I was able to get another apartment, and but continue drinking and using. And that was until I had lost one apartment, and then got another one. And then around 1984, I met my who was to be my second wife in Midtown Manhattan. She worked at the Garment Center, and there was a little bar on 7th Avenue and 37th Street, right around the corner from the firehouse. And I met her. We had dated for several years, and then I had gotten her pregnant and gotten married, and then subsequently we had two more children after that. And which goes to show that both of my wives, I had gotten them pregnant before we had gotten married, and then with my second wife we had two more children after we were married, which goes to show that I breed as well in captivity as I do in the wild.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Somebody help me.
Yeah, I shared that at divorce care with a couple of new ladies in Peachtree City when I was living in Georgia, and that didn't go over particularly well, considering that they had just both lost their Delta airline husbands and did not know was suffering from fear of economic insecurity and hopelessness and anxiety. And here I am trying to tell a joke as we're being all introduced to each other.
We're going to stray on jokes, and I don't want to, but you're just reminding me of a scene from As Good as It Gets, where Jack Nicholson is ridiculous, and Helen Hunt is screaming to her boyfriend Jack Nicholson and her mother, "Why can't I just have a good boyfriend, a decent boyfriend?" And the mother interrupts and says, "There's no such thing. We all want that. There's no such thing." All right, I'll stop. Proceed.
All right. So this drama of addiction continued on, for another several years, and I had actually maintained my apartment in Brooklyn after I had gotten married to my wife, and she would use with me occasionally. She didn't demonstrate as much of a cocaine addiction as I did, but I knew I had a problem with her when one day we were drinking a half gallon of Jim Beam, and then I had fallen asleep, and I woke up to see her at my coffee table with eyes wide open, doing what was left of my cocaine. I said she might have a problem too, but she was able to get it together, and I apparently didn't. And I would go back and stay at my apartment while I was working as a fireman in Brooklyn, and I had a couple of friends move in, and they were heroin addicts. So it was quite the scene because we were all alcoholic, my friend and his girlfriend, Frank, who, by the way, I had not seen for many years. We were in a band together, my buddy, we called him California Frank. And it turned out that I had met him one day when I was driving into Manhattan while I was in recovery years later. And I had driven him across the 59th Street Bridge. I had picked him up and we started talking. And this was a man that stole a record collection from me. He would steal my drugs if I fell asleep and help me look for them when I woke up. And, Frank apologized for what happened in the past, but he was still actively using at that point. And that was the last I saw of him. And then shortly afterwards, he died of a drug overdose, as did his girlfriend. And it was really sad. But, we would sit in a room, and just to show you how this denial works, we would go out and we would be drinking, and we would buy cocaine and heroin. And I would be cooking up the cocaine, because I used to sniff a lot of cocaine until one of the firemen I was working with, got me my freebasing merit badge. So once I was able to start cooking my own cocaine, I did my best Richard Pryor imitation for about 4 years. And that was going down here quick, to the point that before I came into recovery, I would go out and buy, 2 8 balls of cocaine and a bundle of dope, which I was not injecting. I was just sniffing the heroin to counteract the effects. But I very easily could have ended up like John Belushi at that point. And I would look at my friends injecting heroin, and I would look at them and say, "How can you do that?" And then they were looking at me hitting on the crack pipe, and they're looking at me, "How can you do that?" And it just became this vicious cycle. And to be at that point where, you can always find someone that you can perceive as being worse off than you are in their addiction, and use that as an excuse to say, well, I'm not as bad as Frank and his girlfriend, and we went through that for some time. And then eventually I lost that apartment, and there was some run-ins with the law, and some other issues that happened there. And it really came to a head on the morning, one of the, well, and I didn't stop, but this was really like a moment of shock on January 1st of 1988, which was about 25 days before my son was born, my first and only son, which would have been my second child, and the first son that was born with my second late ex-wife now. And I had 5 minutes to get to the firehouse. I was 5 minutes away from the firehouse, and I was on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn at this place called Regent Place. And I had gone down into the basement of one of these baby brownstone buildings, and it was cinder blocked up, and there was a hole in the cinder blocks where you would just bang on the wall, and they would send out like a little cup on a stick, and you put your money in there. And I knew that early in the morning, Paco had really good jumbos. So that was why I was there at that time in the morning. And so I got my three $10 vials of crack cocaine. And as I'm walking up the steps, a boy about 15 years old has a gun pointed at my head.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm looking over at Hugs Not Drug. He's in a corner and he's weeping. This is a great story. Go ahead.
Yes. So I look at this young man and I think to myself, he said to me, "Give me your effing hits." And I looked at him, and I looked at him with disgust and disdain. And my immediate reaction was, I'm going to slap the gun from this kid, and then I'm going to pistol whip him, and then put the boots to him. And the moment that thought entered my head, then right after that, immediately afterwards, another thought came into my head, that I was going to be, and I saw myself looking down at myself with a hole in my head at the bottom of the stairs, with the fireman that I work with coming to pick up my body, and thinking about my then, soon to be 8-year-old daughter, that was going to be, left, and my wife, who was 9 months pregnant. So I said, you know what, maybe it'd be a better idea if I just gave the kid the hits. So I did. And I got to the firehouse with about 10 seconds to spare. And at the end of the tour that day, New Year's Day, I went into the captain's office, and I went to this thing called the commissary fund. And I said, "Captain, can I write a chit to the commissary for $30? He says, "Sure, John, just pay it back at payday, or pay back when you can," because we had some, petty cash in the firehouse. So I took it was like the same, three $10 bills, went back to the same hole in the wall at 6 o'clock. Only this time I looked up and down the street, and since it was busier and it was in the early evening, there was actually a lookout. The dealers had a lookout at that point. And I went down there and bought the same 3 vials of crack cocaine that I was trying to buy that morning. Drove home and started all over again as if nothing could happen. So the idea that you can scare an addict just does not work. And, I remember so many times that I was fighting this addiction, particularly, with the cocaine and heroin, that I would say, you know what, I'm just going to drink tonight. And what I could do is I could literally pass a polygraph telling you that I wouldn't drink. And, that's one of the things we hear at meetings, and it's a phrase, that's bantered about that. Well, how can you tell when an addict or an alcoholic is lying? And then we say, well, when their lips are moving, they're lying when their lips are moving. And that is true to a certain extent. However, I literally would be able to pass a polygraph telling you that I had the intention just to drink alcohol that night. But if I had a bottle of high proof alcohol, I could literally mark the bottle about a third to halfway down, where what would happen is as soon as that alcohol, soaked my cerebral cortex, and then I got to the point that my amygdala, hijacked my hypothalamus, and the next thing I know, the compulsion to use was to the point that I was off to the races, and I'd have about 10 shots in me, and next thing I know, I'm driving to the trap, and buying drugs all over again.
Yeah, you're talking about the amygdala and the hypothalamus, the pleasure centers of the brain that doesn't give us a chance. All this insanity that you're saying is because we've been hijacked. Our brains are hijacked.
And people don't realize that addiction and alcoholism, and I can use those terms interchangeably. Every alcoholic is an addict. Now, every addict may not necessarily demonstrate addiction to alcohol.
Hey, Barleycorn here. I really don't want to stop right now because we're really rolling, but I think it's better that we stop right now and give John a break, and he's agreed to come back tomorrow and finish this. But we've gone an hour of talking, and I'm going to break this up into 2 segments at least, and we probably got 2 more segments with John. I just want to thank you again, and Harry, take us out, and remember, hugs are better than drugs, so enjoy, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a great day.